Words of our Divine Mother from the book The Mother by Sri Aurobindo, with Mother's comments of 1951, comments on chapter 4, page 75. Question. Friends from outside have often asked me this question. When one is compelled to earn his living, should one just conform to the common code of honesty, or should one be still more strict? For this, our mother says this depends upon the attitude your friend has taken in life. If he wants to be a sadhak, it is indispensable that rules of ordinary morality do not have any value for him. Now, if he is an ordinary man living the ordinary life, it is purely a practical question, isn't it? He must conform to the laws of the country in which he lives to avoid all the trouble. But all these things, which in ordinary life have a great relative value, can be looked upon with a certain indulgence, change totally the minute one decides to do yoga and enter the divine life. Then all values change completely. What is honesty in ordinary life is no longer at all honest for you. Besides, there is such a reversal of values that one can no longer use the same ordinary language. If one wants to consecrate oneself to the divine life, one must do it truly. That is, give oneself entirely, no longer do anything for one's own interest, depend exclusively upon the divine power to which one abandons himself or oneself. Everything changes completely, doesn't it? Everything. Everything. It is a reversal. What I have just read from this book applies solely to those who want to do yoga. For others, it has no meaning. It is a language which makes no sense. But for those who want to do yoga, it is imperative. It is always the same thing in all that we have recently read. One must be careful not to have one foot on one side and the other foot on another, not to bestride two different boats, each following its own course. That is what Sri Aurobindo often says. One must not lead a double life. One must give up one thing or another. One cannot follow both. This doesn't mean, however, that one is obliged to get out of the conditions of one's life. It is an inner attitude which must be totally changed. One may do what one is in the habit of doing, but do it with quite a different attitude. I don't say it is necessary to give up everything in life and go away into solitude to an ashram necessarily to do yoga. Now, it is true that if one does yoga in the world and in the worldly circumstances, it is more difficult, but it is also more complete. Because every minute one must face problems which do not present themselves to someone who has left everything and gone into solitude. For such a one, these problems are reduced to a minimum. While in life, one meets all sorts of difficulties, beginning with the incomprehension of those around you with whom you have to deal. One must be ready for that, be armed with patience and a great indifference. But in yoga, one should not no longer care for what other people say or think. It is an absolutely indispensable starting point. You must be absolutely immune to what the world may say or think of you and to the way it treats you. People's understanding must be something quite immaterial to you and should not even slightly touch you. That is why it is generally much more difficult to remain in one's usual surroundings and do yoga than to leave everything and go into solitude. It is much more difficult, but we are not here to do easy things. Easy things we leave to those who do not think of transformation. Next question: if someone has acquired a lot of money by dishonest means, could some of it be asked for the divine? For this, a mother says Sri Aurobindo has already answered this question. He says that money in itself is an impersonal force. The way in which you acquire money concerns you alone personally. It may do you great harm, it may harm others also, but it does not in any way change the nature of the money, which is an altogether impersonal force. Money has no color, no taste, no psychological consciousness. It is a force. It is like saying that the air breathed out by a scoundrel is more tainted than that breathed out by a honest man. I don't think so. I think the result is the same. One may, for reasons for a particular nature, refuse money which has been stolen, but that is altogether practical reasons. It is not because of the divine reasons. This is purely human idea. One may, from a practical point of view, say, "Ah, no, the way in which you acquired this money is disgusting, so I don't want to offer it to the divine," because one has a human consciousness. But if you take someone, let us suppose the worst, who has killed and acquired money by the murder, if all of a sudden he is seized by terrible scruples and remorse and tells himself, "I have only one thing to do with this money, give it where it can be utilized for the best in the most impersonal way," it seems to me that this moment is preferably to utilizing it for one's own satisfaction. I said that the reasons which could prevent one from receiving ill gotten money may be reasons of a purely practical kind, but they may also be profound reasons of, I don't want to say moral, but spiritual nature, from the point of view of tapasya. One may tell somebody, "No, you cannot truly acquire merit with this fortune which you obtained in such a terrible way. What you can do is to restore it." One may feel that there is a restitution, for instance, which will help one to make progress than simply passing on the money to anyone works or any other works whatever. One may see things in this way. One can't make rules. This is what I never stop telling you. It is impossible to make a rule. In every case, it is different. But you must not think that money is affected. Money as a terrestrial force is not affected by the way in which it is obtained. That can in no way affect it. Money remains the same, your note remains the same, your piece of gold remains the same, and as it carries its force remains there. It harms only the person who has done wrong, that is evident. Then the question remains, in what state of mind and for what reason does your dishonest man want to pass on this money or his money to a work he considers divine? Is it a measure of safety, through prudence, or to lay his heart at rest? Evidently, this is not a very good motive, and it cannot be encouraged. But if he feels a kind of repentance and regret for what he has done, and feeling that there is but one thing to do, and that is precisely to deprive himself of what he was wrongly acquired and utilize it for the general good as much as possible, then there is nothing to say against it. One cannot decide in a general way, it depends upon the instance. Only if I understand well what you mean, if one knows that a man has acquired money by the most unnameable means, obviously it will not be good to go and ask him for money for some divine work, because that would be like rehabilitating his way of gaining money. One cannot ask, that is not possible. If spontaneously for some reason he gives it, there is no reason to refuse it. But again, it is quite impossible to go and ask for him about that, because it is as though one legitimized his manner of acquiring money. So that makes a great difference. And generally, in these cases, those who go and ask money from rascals use means of intimidation. They frighten them, not physically, but about their future life, about what may happen to them. They give them the fright. It is not very nice. These are procedures one ought not to use. Next question. Besides money, what are the other divine powers delegated here on earth, Mother? For this mother says, all the divine powers are manifested here and deformed here. Light, life, love, force, all, harmony, ananda, all. There is nothing which is not divine in its origin and which does not exist here under a completely distorted or travestied form. The other day we had spoken at length about the way in which divine love is deformed in its manifestation here. It is the same thing. Next question. How can money be conquered for the mother? For this mother says, there is a hint here. Three things are interdependent. Sri Aurobindo says here, power, money and sex. I believe the three are interdependent and that all the three have to be conquered to be sure of having any one. When you want to conquer one, you must have the other two. Unless one has mastered these three things, desire for power, desire for money, and desire for sex, one cannot truly possess any of them firmly and surely. What gives so great an importance to money in the world as it is today is not so much money itself, for apart from a few fools who heap up money and are happy because they can heap it up and count it. Generally, money is desired and acquired for the satisfaction it brings, and this is almost reciprocal. Each of these three things not only has its own value in the world of desires, but leans upon the other two. I have related to you that visions, that big black serpent which kept watch over the riches of the world, the terrestrial wealth. He demanded the mastery of the sex impulse. Because, according to certain theories, the very need of power has its end in this satisfaction, and if one mastered that, if one abolished that from human consciousness, much of the need for power and desire for money would disappear automatically. Evidently, these are the three great obstacles in the terrestrial human life, and unless they are conquered, there is scarcely a chance for humanity to change.